What's up, y'all? It's Alex Miller from The Eagle, joined by Travis Brown here at the Eagle Newsroom. Travis, some big news on the A&M football front today. A key returning addition to the Aggies. Travis, you had the news this morning.
Yeah, Nia Smith is coming back at wide receiver. A big veteran get for A&M, as you would say. He last year was his fourth season. Of course, he went out injured in that Arkansas game, the fourth game of the year last year, and with a broken leg, and was out for the remainder of the year. Has spent that time rehabbing and working back to full health, but he had the decision to make. Was he going to go to the NFL draft after his fourth season or exercise that? I'm not quite sure if it's using the COVID year or a medical redshirt year. It's probably 6 and 1, half and dozen the other, but a fifth year back with the Aggies, and they need it because while there is some experience now in that wide receiver room, they lost a lot of their experience, and they needed to bolster that depth.
Yeah, getting Anias back is certainly a win for A&M, for Jimbo. You think about the guys that left and, maybe not being able to close out maybe as many guys as you would have wanted. I know we talked with Colin Deaver last week on the podcast about adding Tyron Smith, but I mean, you think about what Anias has meant to this offense from the day he pretty much got here. I know it took him it took him about half a season to get integrated into the offense as a freshman, but ever since then, I mean, he has been a stalwart on that side of the ball. Yeah,
you mentioned it. He was kind of one of those guys that fans, as soon as he got onto campus, were wanting to see what he had, and early in that freshman year, he kind of sparked out and made a few big plays, and people were really, really leaning on Jimbo, at least from a fan's perspective, to get him out back on the field more. And he, as the season went on, he saw more action. The Lamar game early in his freshman year, he had 6 catches for 66 yards, and you go into the Arkansas game, 5 catches for 80 yards, had a touchdown in both of those games, and wanting to see more of him, he saw a little bit more action going through, but those were the big games of that freshman season. And then his sophomore year was really his biggest year, because that was the year where he was going back and forth between wide receiver and running back. He had over 500 yards receiving that season, 6 touchdowns, also had 300 yards rushing, the most he's had in his season. And he had 500 yards again his junior season. Last year, of course, was cut down because he missed the season because of injury. But he's just been a consistent receiver. He's never been the leading receiver, but he's been a consistent one. He works into that slot more role, that kind of possession role more times than not, and has been really key to A&M's quarterbacks on third down. Kind of was especially carving himself into that role before he got hurt last year. But when you look at what they bring back, Evan Stewart, who's going to be a sophomore, Moose Muhammad, who's going to be a junior, or third
year player. At this point, it's like first-year player.
Yeah, you're right. Third-year player. And Moose Muhammad, having a fifth-year guy back that can kind of help rally the troops there will be good, because there's not a terrible amount of depth there.
Yeah, I mean, A&M lost 4 key guys. I mean, you lose Chase Lane, who, had been here forever. Chris Marshall, of course, was a stud early, but, got suspended and has since departed. Devin Price, son of, Terry Price, A&M's defensive line coach, defensive ends, and, he was a guy that had got some looks but never really, emerged as a threat. And then Yul Keith Brown showed flashes of brilliance, never really got it clicking, and then, he kind of disappeared at the end of the season. It seemed like he dealt with some injury stuff and just didn't get things going. A&M signed 2 recruits, of course, Raymond Cottrell and Micah Tease. You can listen to an interview with Micah Tease, by the way, at theeagle.com, thanks to our friends at the Tulsa World. So, yeah, I mean, whereas wide receiver, probably a month ago was starting to look like a serious question mark, things have really started to shape up in A&M's favor at least a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying this room is great, but it looks a lot better than it did a month ago. That's for sure.
You miss the height of Chris Marshall, of course, who transferred away, because now you have Anaya Smith at 5'11". You have Micah Tease at 5'11".
We didn't even mention Noah Thomas though.
Noah Thomas, he had a very strong blocking role through the first part of the season, but then when receivers were going down hurt and they had guys, he stepped up and proved that he had a little bit of something. So he's a guy that's returned with a little bit of experience.
And he's a guy, he's kind of the one guy with that height and could potentially maybe add some size over the offseason. I mean, he is more of your prototypical outside receiver, whereas Evan Stewart plays outside, but he could easily play the slot too. You could really move him around wherever you needed to.
That's the thing that concerns me is, I don't get me wrong, all of these guys are great receivers and have shown that they have the skill set to hold different kinds of receiving roles. But height-wise, if you looked at him like as NFL prospects, Evan Stewart, Moose Muhammad, Anaya Smith, all kind of the similar mold. Evan Stewart has the speed that maybe the other two don't have.
And maybe the leap.
Don't get me wrong. They all of them are fast, but has an edge on speed then. And has the leap, which kind of makes him a bigger receiver than he really is. But it kind of falls into that same category of A&M having a lot of possession receivers. It would be good for A&M fans to see Evan Stewart be able to spread the field a little bit more and get behind defenses a little bit more than he did last year. I know he was okay at it. See if he can take that step forward on it. But yeah, then who's going to fit into that fourth receiver role? Because Moose Muhammad and Anaya Smith, for the most part, played the same position. That's one of the reasons why he didn't get a lot of touches early on in his career, is because he was playing that same position as Anaya. So it'll be interesting to see how they organize these guys and make the most of those guys they have out there.
Two things, Travis. One, I think this is where A&M's use of tight ends will really come in handy, especially with a guy like Donovan Green, who really emerged the second half of the season and was becoming more of a threat in the passing game. Curious to see maybe what kind of steps forward he could possibly take into 2023. Didn't see a lot of Jake Johnson last year, but he's a guy that looks the part of a potential weapon at tight end, and not to mention still have a number of guys in that room. You think about
Max
Wright.
coming back.
He's coming back.
Yeah.
Theo Ostrom, we haven't even really seen much of him.
Right.
Signed a couple more guys. And so the other thing, too, is with, A&M has some semi-proven commodities at running back. I think they're going to have a good mix of depth between Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, and I'm blanking on another. But this could be a chance where maybe Anais sees some time in the backfield a little more potentially. Spread him out, because Moose Muhammad really emerged as a threat when he went down. I mean, he had some really good games that second half of the season, especially when A&M's offense was really not that good. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious to see, how do they use Anais? Because I found it interesting when he posted his video this morning. He lists himself as a running back and a wide receiver, which I guess isn't necessarily a lie, but he's definitely played more wide receiver. How much do they maybe use him at running back a little more? Maybe get a guy like Moose on the field with him at the same time.
That is a really good point.
Ruben Owens, of course.
Right.
Duh. I was like, what am I thinking?
That is a really good point, and there could be a potential for him to slip into the backfield a little bit more. It looked like from that video he posted today that I know his dad has told me his recovery is going really well. The video showed him making cuts, doing drills, and something like that. So it looks like that leg is back and healthy again. Will be interesting to see how good that looks in spring practice. How back to 100% he is when spring practice opens up.
Yeah, I guess the other question too now is, A&M's hired Bobby Petrino as offensive coordinator. Indications are maybe that Jimbo's going to be a little less hands-on with the offense, going to give it over to Petrino. But how similar and maybe what wrinkles does Petrino bring to the offense that is going to, in A&M's hopes, take it to another level? Because clearly what they were using was not working. And so that is why they've made this move. Of course, go and check out Bob Holt's conversation with us on Bobby Petrino from a few weeks ago, at least.
Well, from when he talked with us, Bob Holt, that is, about Bobby Petrino. I mean, one of the things he said about him is that his offense is getting the ball into his playmakers' hands, if you want to overly simplify it. And Anaya Smith is a good case study of that, because he is that guy that can play in the backfield, play multiple wide receiver positions. So it will be pretty interesting to see how he's used in that system.
Nonetheless, a big win for the Aggies, getting a key player back. Travis?
Yeah, I'm going to actually shift gears on you a little bit, because I know you follow this a little bit more closely than I do with what you do here at the Eagle. No signings on recruiting day. A&M stays pat. How surprised or not surprised are you by that?
Yeah, that is a little surprising. I think I've been more surprised at how little they've used the transfer portal, and especially in the first window. Of course, there's going to be the window after spring ball, which, we'll see what happens there. But, I mean, they signed, 3 guys out of the portal? I mean, you had Tony Grimes, Sam McCall, and Tyron Smith. Looks like you had a few guys that are coming in as preferred walk-ons from maybe some group of 5 schools, but it seemed kind of underwhelming. I mean, when you considered, yes, a majority of A&M's departures in the transfer portal were backups, guys that were not seeing time, and the guys who potentially were the ones who got in trouble, of course. And the thing is, the thing that A&M had, in theory at least, was the depth, right? I mean, they had a lot of youth, they had a lot of injuries. That was very hindering to them last year. But when you looked at what maybe they had going forward, it was the depth and the talent of depth. That kind of was taken away a little bit when you consider what they lost, and really didn't replace a ton of it. And had a pretty decent recruiting class given the season that they had, but I think that was probably the thing that jumped out to me the most was, they didn't get the number of guys that maybe you would have expected. I'm curious to see what their scholarship count is at how many scholarship guys they have on roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, just by the simple looking at things, they're still well below the 85 scholarships, not knowing if they've given any to walk-ons or how that's going to go. And we have to mention, too, that there is still another transfer portal window that will open up after spring ball, and that is a time where A&M could maybe poach a few other players who, through spring ball, found out maybe they weren't going to get the playing time they need or be in the role that they were going to need. It'll be interesting to see how it's probably not as talent-rich of a window as the one right after the season, but there still is some options that could be pulled from there.
See, that's the thing, is that if A&M was going to make some splashes out of the transfer portal, the first window was probably the time to do it. I mean, sure, there might be a few guys here and there that pop up in that second window, but if the cream of the crop's real small, everybody else is going to be trying to get those guys too. So, kind of maybe a little bit of a head scratcher when you think about it. And linebacker's certainly a position where there's still some question marks. Going to have a lot of youth. I know they bring back Edgerrin Cooper and Chris Russell, but they're going to have to get some stuff into shape. Not to mention, still got to make a hire on each side of the ball. Need to hire a guy to replace
Tyler Santucci,
and they need a guy on the offensive side of the ball to replace Tommy Robinson. Still haven't made a couple of assistant hires, so curious to see how long that takes to finish up.
A lot of things still to take shape.
For sure. Well, hey, that's going to do it for us today. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage on A&M sports, including football. So until next time, we'll see you.